Okay, hello again. Um, the three presentations that we just had was very useful and provides very informative lessons to Korean government and KDI research team. For our last part of our session, we have here designated discussant Dr. Junghyun Kwon from KDI. Dr. Kwon, please give us a comment. We have very limited time, so we have 10 minutes or so. So you can pick just one of the three presentation, or you can just provide a general comment that can be applied to all the presentation. Okay, please.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'll take the whole comment on the whole presentation because every presentation has gave us some insights to learn. So we have learned today that recent evidence shows that policy interventions, some experiments gave us quite insights and helped to solve a wide range of policy problems, and RCT are regarded as some kind of golden standard and how they are providing some reliable evidences to us. And the increased government interest on these kind of policy experiments is increasing, and in every country they are trying to they are having their behavior insights team and try to policy experiment. In Korea, our interest is also increasing, and this conference is some kind of testimonial for the increase of interest. And our KDI have investigated how we can adopt some policy experiment in policy process. So we have learned some previous experiences from other OECD countries, and those experiences and gave us some insights in policy. So first of all, I'd like to talk about Dr. Bredel's and Dr. Dirkman's presentations. During their presentations, we've learned some government's role is really important. And we were quite interesting that what does government to take those policy experiment, even though we know the policy, evidence-based policy is very important. It's some kind of becoming golden standard for evaluating policies, but the policy experiment takes time and cost. And how the government, all the departments are trying to take those policy experiment processes during their policy process. For example, the Netherlands case, I saw that every department in the government of Netherlands are taking some policy experiment processes. And I was wondering whether there's some incentives to make each department take some policy experiment there. And the other question is like, Dr. Bredel suggested some key success element for the policy experiment, and he emphasized some government support, administrative support, political support. And what do you think, what kind of elements needs to be more likely to be prioritized to deliver policy experiment in policy process be successful? And Dr. Bredel mentioned that there are some main obstacles to spreading the policy experiment in RTs and behavior insights in public policies. So what do you think the main obstacles of spreading behavior insight in policy processes in terms of government? What kind of role the government needs to activate those policy experiments? The other related to Dr. Varanasi's presentation, I thought that with some insightful case studies, Dr. Varas pointed out very important points related to financial impact of the policy interventions. Many researchers on nudges are providing some how those nudges are effective in behavioral change. But in policy perspective, we want to know how we can allocate the resources more effectively and how those policy interventions are cost effective. So in that term, the cost effectiveness and return on investment is very important in policy intervention term. But the one question arises with the whether the return on investment that Dr. Baranati suggested was from different researches. So every policy interventions are based on their context. So like Dr. Baranati mentioned, when there's policy experiment and there's effect, when it's scaled up, it can have some different effect. Then how we can rely on these results, which can differ by some context. So it would be great if you can give us some insights about how we can adjust those context issues. And regarding to scale up, with respect to the scale up issue, there are so many other issues related when there's a scale up, the effect is not, the effect diminishes or it goes away. But in researcher perspective, we can think about the scale up issues and external validity can help if we set up the experiment in the very early stages, like Dr. Baranati made a very interesting scale-up example. Like she presented some comparison of Buamdong and Seoul, and Buamdong and Seoul is quite different places. Buamdong can represent Seoul very well. In that case, if we make some experiment in Buamdong and if we want to scale up to Seoul, it's not gonna be effective. So what is some kind of golden standard or toolkit like the Monash University's case? Do you have any suggestion for how we can make it more reliable or it less varying by the context?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kwon. She raised the important issues and asked many questions to each of the presenters. So I would like to ask each of you to respond to her questions. So why don't Dr. Brander go first?
Yeah. Merci. Thanks for the very good question and the comments you raised, Dr. Kwon. Coming back to your question on my presentation, I think you asked for the success elements and which should be prioritized. I mean, this is a question difficult to answer. I think for establishing units within or close to government that conduct behaviorally informed policy experiments or pre-assessments of policies, I think, as you said, administrative and political support appears to be the most important one to get such units started from OECD country experiences. And I mean, this was in particular the case in the UK, but also in the US for the SBST team, where without the political support of the government, these institutions or these units wouldn't have been set up and could have the possibility to grow. But all the other elements I highlighted, I think are very important as well. So you need the right people, you need the expertise, and you need also a good location where such units are set up. Coming to your second question, the obstacles to spread policy experimentation in governments. Well, there are many elements, of course, that were highlighted by Thomas and also by Chiara, which I also highlight in discussion. But I think one point is that the political process in itself is, of course, difficult in the sense that not every project or economic policy problem can be pre-tested using RCTs or running some kind of empirical analysis, right? So there are some natural limits to that. And another important obstacle, which was also highlighted by Thomas, I think, is that the communication of the work that such a new unit is doing is very important to report publicly, right? on the one hand via reports, but the units should also get started with corporations, concrete projects, where problems exist across government. So such units, wherever they are placed, for instance, in the Ministry of Finance, should try to cooperate with other government agencies. They should cooperate with academia, and they should make themselves, visible in terms of preparing seminars, in terms of participating, organizing conferences, and also in terms of the use of different media channels to increase their visibility and to create demand also for their services.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would like to follow the order of a presentation. So, Dr. Chiara Barzani, would you go the second? Okay, please.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you so much for the very insightful questions as well. So just to answer, first of all, one question about if the return on investment was specific to behaviors only. Well, I really hope that I made the point that this return on investment and financial impact approach can be applied not only to behaviors, but really to any policy outcome, as long as the outcome is measurable. So take your example of the vaccination of COVID vaccinations. As I'm sure Korea is preparing the distribution of vaccines, as many other countries are doing exactly the same. Well, it would be great to know to what extent not only what's the best policy intervention to convince people to get vaccinated potentially, but also what is the best policy intervention to make sure that the number of COVID-19 cases are actually going down. So linking not only the behavioral outcome, but the policy outcome and the public health outcomes is really important. Then another point that I would really like to comment on is the comment on the continuous evaluation. So how can we make sure that if one experiment worked in one single, at one time, how can we make sure that it works even in the future? Well, we can't. It's very difficult to do this, but in some instances we can still track the population. In the experiment that I show about the medical doctors, we were able to track the policy outcome over time, and we will surely do the same even during the COVID-19 season. So we will still be able to see if the policy experiment had an impact in years to come. And finally, the comment about scaling, to what extent it's possible to scale a policy experiment from, for example, one neighborhood in Seoul to another one. Well, of course, context matters. So if we can, it's always a good idea to test in the specific context. But let's be realistic. This is very difficult to do in practice. So in my experience, we really need to be politically sensitive as well, have a sensitivity in terms of what is practical to do and what it's not, remembering that zero evidence is always worse compared to a little bit of evidence. So even if something has been tested only in, say, 10 neighborhoods out of 12, well, maybe that's good enough, and it will be the judgment of the practitioners working on the project. But yeah, I think it's important to stay relevant and realistic on policy experience in government. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And lastly, Dr. Thomas Dokmat, would you like to give us an answer or comment?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. Well, I think the main difference between the US and also the UK, the US and the UK compared to the Netherlands is that in the Netherlands it's more of a bottom-up initiative, the application of behavioral insights. So it was really like an external force, scientific councils for government policy advising the government to actually start applying behavioral insights, instead of the administration itself deciding we're going to apply behavioral insights right now. So yes, there was a cabinet reaction to these three reports I mentioned from 2014, and also the cabinet reaction which was sent to Parliament. There's also the agreement made that every ministry would at least do one experiment to show whether it would be of added value for their work. This is actually how we managed that the entire government would at least do something. For the remaining 5-6 years, I've been always trying to push this agenda forward. I think it's also a matter of trying to convince people of the added value. And I think what I see in the Netherlands is really this very diverse field. So some ministries, they already start to invest in teams quite early on. Others, they just joined more recently. And I think also the COVID-19 crisis also increased the awareness again. So also some ministries which were lagging behind, they're now going to invest in behavioral experts. I think it's really a good development. So this is really why, well, things are gradually progressing and more organizations are applying behavioral insights. Like I said, one of the key success factors is also really buy-in of management. When management believes in this, then usually things proceed much quicker. So I can give you one example. Our Authority for Consumers and Markets is a relatively small organization. About 600 people are working there. Their management, well, they really are going for this. They have a team of 10 to 12 people, while I'm only having a team of 3 people. So you can really see the difference there. When it comes to time and cost of testing out interventions, also running experiments, and also how to actually do this, I would say go for the opportunities you have. So I think when you look at the implementation side of the policy change, so these implementation agencies, we're sending out lots of letters and emails and also forms and so on, and also have websites where they are communicating with citizens and businesses. They usually have more time because the political pressure is a little bit off there. So there is more room to actually send out 2 versions of an email or perhaps even 3. So this, I think, a good way to start. We look at the policy development side of the policy cycle. There, I would say, go for those projects where you find there's a little bit more time than usually. And I think in the Netherlands, we have these coalition agreements where all kinds of measures are already written down we are going to take the coming 4 years. And usually at the end of this, this period of 4 years, more room starts to exist because most measures have been implemented. We're going to look forward to the next administration and the next government, next coalition. And it also means there's more time to think about new proposals and also to test out things. So currently I'm working on this savings instrument for homeowners to start saving to make the home more sustainable. And we're still thinking about it, also collaborating with 2 other ministries, Internal Affairs and Ministry of Finance. And the first thing we're going to do now is an online experiment to see which type of saving instrument people are finding more attractive. We will be using different types of setups, also using behavioral insights in the design. And hopefully, when this first experiment is successful, we also can do some more experiments to actually, for example, test out what kind of setup of the instrument will stimulate to the continuation of saving, for example. So I think there are lots of things one can test out in this way when you have the room to maneuver still. So this is very important. So go for those moments in time when the political pressure is a little bit lower and you can actually start testing things out.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Leslie, we have Director John Brundle from OECD online here. So I will appreciate if you have any comment or any advice to us in here in Korean government or research team in KDI. We appreciate any piece of advice.
I honestly do not think that I have anything. I don't think I have anything to add to what has been said. It's it is very clear that this is leading edge in one ways. I think it's important not to exaggerate what we can achieve with this, to have expectations in line, and I think we are at the experimentation stage of this reform in many countries, and it'll be very interesting to follow these developments, and we are very much looking to Korea as well in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So you have any other comments? Okay, so I think we have had a very fruitful session here today. The 3 presenters and 1 discussant, they provide us with very valuable lessons and insight about how RCT can be done in a real world and what the Korean government should do to successfully implement the new reform approach in evaluation system. I hope the audiences who listened to this session, online or offline, felt the same way as I did. Thank you again for all the presenters and commentators and all audiences. So I will close this session now. Thank you. Thank you very much.